Okay, so this is week 4 of CIT 261. I'm going to be covering 4 different topics today as an overview, and then if we have any questions or if anybody's still confused, then we can delve into them a little bit deeper in the semester. I tried to give some good examples. I'm going to use a lot of just my code that I did to give you guys an idea of how these work. So this is for CSS3, transitions, transforms, and animations, and how you can manipulate your elements. So CSS transforms methods, you have translate, rotate, scale, skew, and then matrix, which is a combination of all of the above. So translate is going to move an element on the screen. So in the example here at the top, it moves the element over 10 pixels and down 20 pixels from its original position. Rotate is just going to rotate it by the degree that's specified. And scale, you can make it larger or smaller depending on what your goal is. The next one is skew. Now skew has several different kinds. You can do skew, just a regular skew. You can skew it off of the x-axis or skew it off of the y-axis. That's a good question. I believe that they just scale, Zach asked if you can scale X and Y specifically. I think you scale it by height and width instead of off of the X and Y axis. I'm not 100% sure on that though. But I know that when I'll show you some of the code later, and what I did when I incorporated it into my animation, I put it in the parameters that I was using were height and width. So I believe the X and Y axis is just going to be if you're trying to move it like across the page or in a different location. Scale, I think you just use the height and width on that one. So matrix you can use to combine all of the above methods into one, and that one takes 6 parameters. So I'll pull up an example of that too, but it should be height, width, degree, and which axis you're on. So let me get to the next page here. So rotate, I took a snippet of my code here. Rotate allows you to rotate an element clockwise or counterclockwise by specifying the degree. So in the example, I have the normal div element, and then in the code, I rotated it down so that it was skewed. Now, in my code, I have it broken up by CSS file and HTML and script, but I combined it all together for the purpose of the presentation. So in the style script is where you would put everything to affect the elements. So I have my div here, or my element, and the width is, I put the width and the height and all the parameters here, and then I went ahead and affected what I did to it. So we have transform is how you're going to start all of these. So transform, and then rotate, and then I specified the degrees that I wanted to rotate it by. So I'll pull up my actual code here. So here's the live example. Let's go down to transforms. We'll get into transitions in a minute. So transforms, you can, like I showed it before. Let me pull up the HTML for that one. I had this all put together and then I closed out of it on accident when I was getting the Hangouts going. Okay, so this is just my HTML. I've specified the class here for what I want to affect. And then I have my CSS that has all of the code that's actually going to affect the HTML element. So down here is, right here is where I've got it. And then in my brackets, it's easier to navigate between the two to see them. So they all follow the same pattern. You're going to start with transform and then whichever method you want to use. So in this case, I used rotate, and then you specify your parameters. And then, so this one is for IE 9 in case they don't have a newer version. And this one's Safari for the WebKit to make it so that they show up the way that they should on different browsers. So up here for the, I'm trying to find a better example here. So in my code, that's all that I had. I went with the animations or the pictures here on the slide deck because I thought that they were a better explanation of how the pieces of code move instead of just seeing the after effect. And then transitions allow you to change the values of properties seamlessly over specified duration. So in my code here, I have a transition, just a regular box, and then I put into the CSS code. Where did my code go? There it is. I put into the CSS code that I want on hover, I want the box to change. So I've got here the transition 1, hover, and so when I hover over this piece, then it transitions seamlessly. It looks a little bit choppy on the recording when you're sharing screens, but it moves pretty slow or smooth when you execute it on your own computer. So I was able to combine a few of the elements.
So that transition, so the intermittent, like, because you made it so it goes big and then small. So the hover over, all you have to do is tell it, I want it this big when it gets hovered over. The
Yes.
rate of change is, how do you,
so the rate of change is in there also. Let me get back into there. I'm used to reading brackets, so bear with me. So I have the transition, I have the width, the background, the font size, and the color. And these right here specify the seconds. So I want the width to change over a 2-second time frame. Same with the background, the font, the color. So that's going to affect how quickly or slowly it moves.
Okay, cool.
And then down here is what sets. So this is the original width. The font size was originally 1M. And then down here on hover, I wanted it to change to transition 1. Font size is going to change to 3M. And so then the transition here sets it so that it'll move. Does that make sense?
Yep, perfect.
Okay. So they're all set up pretty much the same as far as transitions, transforms. You have to have the original here and then another piece of code to show how or what you want it to change to. So in the, go back to the so that's transition. So transform, that's the piece where I just rotated the box. I have the initial parameters for that element, and then I changed it down here, and I used rotate to skew it by, or not skew, sorry, that's the wrong word, to rotate it by 120 degrees. And then the final box, you can put it all together and combine transition, transform, and animation into one for a final product here. And that'll move your box. Now this is all done with just CSS and Java, or I'm sorry, CSS and HTML. There's no JavaScript or Flash or anything in here. So that's the nice thing about using animation, transition, and transform, is you can do it with pure CSS. You don't have to use anything else in there. You can do an on-click. You can do, I haven't messed around with on-click a lot. I used on-click when I incorporated the JavaScript. I wanted an event to trigger it. You can do on-load. I did that for a couple of them. I think that in another piece, I was able to get the font to change just by clicking it without using JavaScript. So that is possible. There's a lot of different variations and a lot of different things that you can do with transitions and transforms. So if you guys want to see more of the code, we can delve into that a little bit more. But it's all CSS and it's all wrong. So this is the CSS file. I mean, I'm not sure how comfortable you guys, I'm assuming you're comfortable with CSS, but then I have the actual elements in my HTML document. And then I went and...
So I had a quick question on that one.
Sure.
Back on the code, you put like div dot transition. Can you tell me how that correlates to the HTML? Like
yes.
How,
yeah, let me pull it up in my, I don't know if I have it on my computer anymore. So let me pull up the HTML so we can look at it side by side. Do that one. Okay, so I have them in classes. A lot of the things that I saw did IDs instead. I just decided to do classes. I don't think it really, I mean, you could do it with either one. So right here I have, it's wrapped in a div. So the div is class transform or trans 2D1. So that's the normal element. And then I changed it to 2D2. And that's, so when you come over here, I had it on transform 1 was the original. And then it, sorry, hang on. Here we go. Okay, so I had it here is the transform 1. And then transform 2 is how I would have done it if I wanted to affect it. So they're really two separate ones for transform because I wanted you to see both of them at the same time instead of having it. These were kind of hard to demonstrate because you can do transform and then not tell how you rotated it, if that makes sense. Yeah. So I did a regular element unaffected and then I rotated the other one.
So when you do, so in your CSS, you put div and then the dot and then the name of the class right after it.
Yes. Yep. So the div is just going to call any div element that has a class of that. So I could have 5 boxes that have div or that are wrapped in a div that have the class of final box, and they'll all have the same color and they'll all trigger the same. So if I wanted to have several of these that would move around on hover, then or on load, I could do that, and you could make your screen really busy if you wanted to. So that's why I used it, was because you could, if you had just one div that you were going to affect that you didn't have any others, you could take out this dot portion right here, and this would affect all divs on your page.
Oh, I see.
So it's like a path. Like it's pointing to this particular div instead of all the divs in the document or in the code. So like this targets the whole body for CSS. So the whole body is going to have a padding of 0, a margin of 0. If I wanted to do body dot transition, I think that would work for that as well. And you can narrow down and get precise on how you want to format your code. So if I were going to do an ID instead of a class, this would just be a hash mark or the pound sign. So you do, I believe it's div pound and then whatever. And then in your HTML, it would just show up as div ID equals and then this. They have different uses. So if I wanted to have this have 2 sets of rules for CSS, I could have it have a class and an ID, and then it would share whatever else I had. Is that making sense, or am I totally rambling? And
no, it makes sense. It makes sense. So that brings up another point. I wonder if I mean I can mess with it later, I guess. If you have a class transform trans F2D1 and then an ID somewhere else trans F2D1, is that gonna?
Yeah. So they'll both go unless they contradict one another. Then whichever one takes seniority will go first, or will take over the code. So you can have a class and an ID in there, but you don't want to have them with like the same color. So if you have, let's say I have two elements that I want them to be the same background color. So I label those class and I format the background and the width and the height. But one of those I want to have a different font than the other one. Then I can give that one an ID and narrow down that particular ID and give it a different font. So the class stuff is still all going to stay the same, but I've isolated that particular element and given it more to do. I wish I had a better example to show you.
No, that's perfect. No, it's good. It's perfect.
So, I mean, there's tons of things that you can do. Mine is pretty vanilla as far as the example goes. What was really fun for me was to incorporate the JavaScript. So I did an on-click, so you can see what happens with the transform, transition, and animation. So I click the box and then it changes the color. So again, very simple, but in the code, I have the class final box and I have my code here. I did a function. So I put it in here instead of a separate JavaScript file because I don't have enough JavaScript in this example for it to warrant its own file. But so I did function change box 1. The variable was D, and then get element by ID JS box, and then D dot class name equals and then 2. So this ties into what I have on my CSS for this portion. Right now it kind of looks like just a bunch of gibberish. So if you go into the CSS for the final box, so I have final box for the class, and I want, actually this is the wrong code. I had two versions of this. Let me get back to it here. Okay, so here's my class name. So I'm targeting div with the class name of final box. These are the parameters I'm giving it. But then I'm also going to give it a transition of width of that'll change by 2 seconds. It'll transform 2 seconds, background 2 seconds, and so on. And then I don't know why it says on hover because I have it. Oh, because I have the button in there that'll change it. So then it's going to change it to purple. And oh, okay, no, I'm sorry. So this is the regular graphic that you're seeing. It's been a little bit since I've seen this code. I meant to review all of these, but I didn't get quite this far to this week. So that this portion is the original code that you're seeing right here. So that's where it's changing on its own just over and over and over again. And you can set the duration and the how long it goes. So I have it 4 seconds. Every 4 seconds it rotates, and you can make it indefinite or you can make it stop.
What part of the CSS is it making it look like from a square to a circle?
So that part is going to be the keyframes, and I kind of got ahead of myself. So for animation, you have to have, so animation kind of takes it all into effect. So animation, you have your keyframes here, and keyframes were really hard for me to come up on my, like to just make up on my own from scratch. So I had to look at examples to really understand what it was doing. So this right here is the original proportions. So top left is 0. Yeah, as Zach said, keyframes can be pretty dang confusing. So so this is the original area of where the box is. And then this is where I want the box to go. So if you look, I have the box in the same area as it is, but I'm changing it. Where did I put that? Okay, oh, here it is. Okay, so I have the animation here is what I'm doing to the box. So this is the keyframe for the final box, the original, how the box is moving. And then down here I have the animation So I'm making it from this to this here. So I have the animation name. I have example 2. You have to declare an animation name. So up here, the second one is down here. So animation example 3. So the keyframes are still a little bit confusing for me, and I'm not gonna lie. Like, I figured out how to get them in there and get them to work, but so this is the first animation. This is what it's doing right now. So it's moving in and out. I have it easing in and out, and I have the direction alternating, and I have it on an infinite loop. And then my keyframe down here is I have it transforming from a scale from red and 100%, and then the shape is down here too. I'm trying to remember where I worked that in at. Sorry, I forgot how I think it's the ease in and ease out, which is what's causing it. So.
Okay. No, that's pretty cool. I was like, wow, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, sorry that I couldn't give you a better answer on that one. But so you have to have, so here's the final box. This is where it starts. And it's just going from blue to purple. And here are my keyframes, which aren't moving. And then I come down to my animation, and you name your animation. So I named it example 2 so that I can reference it down here in the keyframes. So keyframes, so this keyframe is pointing to this example, which is going to point to this animation. And so it's going to scale it by 0.3. The background color is red, border radius 100%. And then it's going to change it to orange and transform 0.1. So you can mess with these, but that's how I was able to, I played with it. So I pulled it up, and I wish I had known about JS Fiddle first. I had no idea, otherwise I would have done it on there. But I pulled up my brackets, and I used an example to kind of get the hang of how it affected the element. And then I created my own, and I manipulated it until I got it to do what I wanted it to do. And then in my HTML, so the function I have is change box, my variable. I'm changing the class name from final box. I'm changing that to admin2 is what this function does. And so on click, change box 1 from it's going to change it to admin2. Now, this one is how it is. So this is where you get the admin1. So I have a piece of code here that is making this change from just a regular purple box or blue box turning purple. So it's changing from that to the default of this going in and out orange and purple. Let me refresh the screen here, or orange and yellow. So that's how I used it with the JavaScript. So I have an ID. That's another way you can use your ID as well. So I have the box here, my final box with the class name. I created a function, created a variable. I'm getting the document by ID, or the element by ID JS box, which is down here, because I created another div and tied that div to class admin1. So then I'm using the onClick to change the class to admin2. So I use this one. There's a couple different pieces of code that this fit into for your code topics. I knocked out 5 in 1 with just this graphic right here. So this one did my transition, transform, animation, then triggering all 3 of those with JavaScript and changing a CSS with JavaScript.
Nice. Oh, that's right.
So, Yeah. So is this making any sense the way that I know that I'm not really good talking through the code. It makes sense in my head.
No, you're good. You're good. No, I like how you put, that was pretty neat because you put the sizing, the transforming, the color, and then obviously the click.
Yeah, and it's like a puzzle. It was really cool to try to figure out how they all work together and how changing one element could, drastically change the whole outcome. So it was a lot of playing to get it to work, and I could duplicate it again, but trying to explain it is really, really weird. But the keyframes you have to have the keyframes for any animation. Yeah, nothing explains it as well as practice. That is for sure. I trial and error is how I learn. So I have to see an example and then try to duplicate the example and then manipulate it to get it to do what I want. So what I thought was really cool here is I learned separate code topics, and then I had to try to figure out how to put them all together and make them work cohesively. And that was a trick because I'm very give me an example and I can duplicate that, but then trying to think outside the box and getting it all to work together sometimes is hard for me. So, so let me show you how that could work in like a regular setting. Let me get back up to my last time so when I turned this in, it worked fine, but last time I tried it, not everything worked the way that it should. So hopefully it cooperates here. So, I mean, I'm sure you guys can think of all sorts of practical applications for this type of code. But for the JavaScript, I had a timer going and for a game. And then once the timer hit the end, then it triggered my animation that incorporated all of those effects. So I have a function in the background that says, when timer hits so and so, if score is below a certain point, then it'll trigger a reaction. If score is above a certain point before the timer ends, it triggers a totally different reaction. So there are so many different possibilities with JavaScript and your CSS. And mine looks really, really rudimentary, but it's cool to see all the different things that people do with JavaScript and with CSS. So do you guys have any questions? Do you have anything that you want to see?
So closer? Yeah, let me see. How does that game like actually work? Like,
so the game itself, so time up, sorry you lose. The game I have on a canvas, and it was really kind of interesting to there's a lot of if-then statements in it. So I have my hero here, and he's supposed to, it's from a book, he's supposed to eat these guys, and then it has an equation in there that will randomly populate this little guy anywhere else on the canvas. And so most of this was Canvas, which at first when I was learning Canvas, I'm like, why would that be helpful? Until I saw somebody else make a game out of it, and I thought that was cool. So I have an event listener that is watching for my arrows. Sorry, I forget that you guys can't see. So anytime I arrow up or down, there's an event listener that's listening for those keystrokes, and that's how I'm navigating my little guy here. So and I can pull up the code too if you guys want to see more of that. And when whoever gets close to doing the canvas, if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to share my code if you want to see it and see how I built it.
That's cool. I like it.
Lots of fun stuff. I could get lost in playing around with, and in fact, that's what takes me the longest to do my homework, to build the code. It's because I'm playing with the different effects instead of just satisfying the assignment.
Yeah, that's what happened to me. It's like, oh, cool, I could change the colors.
Yeah. So I wanted to hit all of them at the same time. I know it's a lot of information. Yeah, so many things, Zach says. I know that it's a lot of information at once, but do you guys see how they're all tied in together for the CSS?
Yeah, yeah, and it's and I like how you pointed out. Perfect is all this, almost everything that you just did was this just a CSS3 transitions and animations, and like almost no JavaScript.
Yeah, yep. And I mean, you can do it all JavaScript, and then I only added the JavaScript here to satisfy the assignment to get it to change. I mean, I would assume that there's a way to get it to change colors with just CSS going from your yellow and orange to purple and blue after a certain period of time. I just haven't manipulated it to get it to do that. So, but yeah, there's so many different options that you can do with just CSS and HTML. It's incredible. So I knocked out, I did the 4 topics today just to kind of recap. I had transitions, transforms, animations, and then triggering all of those with JavaScript.
Cool. Awesome. Good job.
All right. And then I will save this and get it uploaded to our site. And then if you guys have any questions or want to see anything closer, let me know. I'm by no means an expert or even really super good at this, but this was my favorite assignment out of all of them.
Yeah, if you if you post it, I'm gonna definitely take a look at it because I like it because you put it really like the HTML and the CSS file is like super clean. Like it's totally easy to read and understand.
Thank you. That was hard to get down for me. I don't know about you guys, but at first I was very sloppy with writing my code.
No, you did. Yours looks way better than mine.
So if you guys want, I can make you. Julian, I think I already added you as a collaborator on my repository. Zach, if you want me to add you, I can. And if you, I used for my site, I used a template that was on GitHub. So all of the basic stuff is, yeah, absolutely. If just send me your GitHub user ID, Zach, over Slack, and then I'll add you. So I didn't have to pre-code all of this so that I could get everything on the same same page.
So okay, cool. He just sent it to you. So this template. I know you already covered your topics and you're already over.
No, you're fine.
Actually, if you wanna stop, are you done? You can stop recording.
Yeah, I can stop.
Just chat a little bit.